Welcome to the Humanergy Leadership Podcast. My name is David Wheatley. We're here to talk leadership in small, bite-sized and practical chunks. Enjoy. This is one of our episodes with the good doctors, Judy Brown and Rick Eigenbrod, and we're talking today about who looks after the leader. And there's some great insights in here about how we have to remind ourselves that the leader's human, that loneliness is the emotion of isolation, and how do we make good decision about the leader's health and welfare. Enjoy. Well, welcome to this episode, and I'm joined again by the good doctors, Rick Eigenbrod and Judy Brown, one coast and another between them. And today we're talking about who looks after the leader. And I think the phrase, it's lonely at the top, and why is that, came up. So, Rick, it's lonely at the top. Why is that?
Yeah, thanks, David. And I might add that that Judy and I stumbled upon this question in conversation, and just to refer back to something we've used as a reference point for many of these sessions. They are the consequence, if you will, of conversation, and this notion of conversation is the fertile ground for emergence. So this is what emerged in a recent conversation. And we were talking about all the things we do in leadership development, et cetera, et cetera. And out of that conversation popped this question: who looks after the leader? And we realized that that's not a question that gets asked. And so the first question about the question is, why doesn't it get asked?
Right. So, Rick,
go ahead, Judy. I'm sorry.
Can I interrupt you and quote you on the thing that I'm putting on my refrigerator because it was so brilliant and it's hit me so hard in the stomach? And that is, Rick said about this question of why doesn't it get asked? When they handed out this role like CEO or leader, the title, the office, the position, it may surprise you to realize that a human being received it. That just knocked me over. We don't think about it that way. We think that when someone gets this title or role or office, it's because they're supremely designed and capable and with unlimited energy to do whatever is needed in taking care of the rest of us. And so anyway, I just kept thinking, it's just a human being. It's a human being of particular skills and particular connections, and we hope emotional intelligence, but it's just a human being. And who is looking out for that person and encouraging that person to look out for him or herself? Take care of
That's
themselves.
what makes this an interesting topic in my mind, is that I was having a conversation with a CEO this week, and his organization's got multiple things happening in 2025. And he was asking, what's my role in all of this? And it came down to your roles to be the calm hand on the helm, just maintain that sense of where we're going as everybody else is panicking around and doing all that kind of stuff. And I think what you're raising is, but what happens if who's helping them be the calm hand when everything else is going crazy around them?
Yeah, this was a more recent thought as you know, as we kind of ran up to our conversation today. This, if you think about this, what you said, David, and these pictures we have of the leader, you know, that go back in history, they go back in mythology, they certainly are embedded in sociology. And if we think, okay, picture a leader, picture 2 or 3 leaders, what are the characteristics we usually associate with that role? And it's something like that. You're the calm in a storm. And certainly, as you think about it a bit, it's infused with things like hierarchy. It's infused with things like paternalism. It's infused with things like noblesse oblige. And so we carry forward these characteristics of leadership that somehow we take on automatically, and I think unconsciously. And what gets lost is this is a human being. And this we could talk about so much here, like, well, yeah, that's why you get the big bucks, you know, because you're going to take all this on. And I thought about, when do we ever go up to the leader or think about the leader as someone who needs us?
Right.
Here's a variant. And then I was thinking about my dad and my mom. And I thought, did I ever, as a kind of grown up teenager, late teenager, college age, maybe even into my 30s, did I ever go up to my mom or my dad and said to them, how you doing? Is there anything I can do for you? And I thought, why don't we do that? Certainly we say, oh, can I help with that task? And we do that at work. Can we help with this task? We don't say, how you doing? Is there anything we can do for you? Why not?
Oh, you're on mute.
It's interesting that quite often can be the question of the executive coach. So the CEO has that, and like the same conversation I was having, it's like, so how are you doing? Comes out of that because of that sense of, it's, you know, we've actually actively said it in our marketing stuff. It's lonely at the top. That's why people like you have people like us to do that. But you're raising a different level of that, which is, what's the responsibility of the direct reports, the people around them, to be there for the leader and pay attention and help them out as well.
Well,
Yeah.
and it strikes me that that's part of paying attention to how the leader is doing and having a kind of relationship or initiating it sometimes from where you sit. So this is initiating up to be able to say to the leader, you know, I've been watching the last couple of weeks and I realize you're carrying a really heavy load.
Yeah.
And I wonder how you're doing with it. Are you going to be able to take the vacation you had planned to take?
It's kind of the, hey, I got this, you go home.
Yeah, if there's real reciprocity, there needs to be that kind of feel to it. Or even if I can't say I've got this, you go home, to be able to say, I'm aware that this is a really rough time. What can I do to help? What can I do to help? I'm thinking, I'm part of an organization where one of the leaders said the other day that he was walking. He had a wagon full of stuff. He was moving from his house to a neighbor's house down the street, and his stuff stacked up on this, like a kid's wagon, and he's pulling the wagon. And this little voice behind him says, and the things are falling off the wagon as he's pulling this. A little voice behind him says, would you like some help? And he's this guy's a grown up. He says, no, I'm doing fine. He walks on, more things falling off the wagon. The little voice says, are you sure you don't need some help? And I think it's something about coming to a leader with that voice tone, if not those exact words, that opens up the possibility of a real conversation between humans. And there's something about it happening among those of us who are part of a team in an organization that feels to me like more of a safety net than just the coach. And all three of us have been coaches. So, you know, we know the power of that, but there's something about the community itself having the sense that that's a reasonable question to ask the leader.
Right. Which then goes to the team, doesn't it? Because if we're talking about a CEO, then his or her direct reports are all leaders in their own right, but they're all kind of part of a team that's there. And so the broader question is that you're asking is, are we looking out for each other?
Yes,
And then the one place we forget quite often is the person who's got the calm hand on the helm,
right.
because they're the ultimate responsibility. Are we looking after them? And something you said, Judy, triggered to, and this might have come out of some of your work, but years ago, reading something about grief, one of the notes that I pulled was, don't say, is there anything I can do? Because that actually puts the burden on the other person. Actually
Right.
do something, because
Mm.
then that takes the burden away. So it even goes to, if people are recognizing that the leader needs something, then do something for them.
Yeah.
Don't just say, what can I do?
I played with the notion about if I was going to operationalize some of the thinking, and I want to invite us and anybody else listening in to begin to peel the onion about the assumptive basis, the prescriptions, etc., that underlie the behaviors and the nature of the relationships that we're talking about. Dependency relationships, paternalism, et cetera, et cetera. What do those have to do with the fact that we have these models that everybody falls into? So I thought, well, if I operationalize some of the things that Judy and I were talking about in the first meeting I had with a team, here's what I would have to say to them.
This is the CEO speaking,
This
right?
is the CEO speaking to his team, her team, right? After all the pleasantries and formalities. I would start with that very sentence. When they handed out this title, this office, this chair, a human being received it. I would say, I am responsible for the greater good. Share that responsibility. Never come asking for what optimizes a part and sub-optimizes the whole. Judy, you have different language for that thought. Would you?
Whenever Rick says that, I have to have it translated into some other language for me. So my version of it would be, never come to me with a request that I do something for your unit that is at the cost of the other parts of the organization.
There you go.
Is that it? Okay.
Here's another one I would say. Before you come asking me for an answer, ask yourself this question. What makes you think I know more about this than you do? Yes, it is lonely at the top. Loneliness, we take for granted. Lonely is the top. So what? You're getting the big bucks, blah, 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 blah. Why is it lonely at the top? Lonely, I'm here to tell you guys, lonely is the emotional component of isolation. Don't do that to me. And and one last thing, drag me to lunch, but not last thing, drag me to lunch for a walk. And if I'm telling you I'm too busy to leave for an hour, then you get even more insistent. Because I think I can't go away for an hour. I am in trouble, and so are we. Drag me away for lunch or a walk. And lastly, does this sound familiar? Ask me. No, really ask me. How you doing? How can I help? I've come to this. I had the same question. That would be my speech in the first. So the question is, what would you say as the CEO? And by the way, it doesn't have to be said the first day. It can be said anytime you walk in a room with the team.
But it strikes me that the power of saying it the first day is, because as you said, we come to our relationship with the CEO with these set of ingrained ideas. What you're doing by saying that the first day is you are changing the initial conditions of the relationship in the moment in a way that's really quite startling if you think about it.
Oh,
And it's kind of, it's sort of a wake up. But it's also a reminder, it strikes me, that you are saying to your direct reports, you too suffer from this, from the people who report to you. So how are you going to set an initial condition with them where there's real reciprocity, and despite the responsibilities that they have, that other people will look out for them? You know, this we've talked often about the research that says that that the health of the leader really impacts the health of the whole organization. And our conversation dragged me back to a book that I used to just love called Resonant Leadership. And it was Richard Boyatzis, who's now at Case Western Reserve with the folks who are doing appreciative inquiry and so forth up there. And what the research said was that, and I found myself, you guys are going to laugh at me, I didn't have a magic marker. So I found myself just writing on the back of the sheet what I learned from their research, which is the CEO, and we'll use the CEO as an example, has such a sense of responsibility, and that they need to keep doing. And so they get on a kind of gerbil wheel, is what I would call it. And what happens is when you push yourself that hard, we were talking about David having pushed himself hard in a situation. When you push yourself that hard, you lose your attunement to your own intuition and ability to sense what's going on. And when you do that, you lose it to other people as well. First stage is you don't have a sense of yourself. Second is you don't have a sense of them. And when they sense you don't have a sense of them, they begin to get some distance from you. And so what happens is that something comes that's a crisis, and you've got to make a decision as the CEO. You're out of tune with your own intuitions, and the other guys aren't going to talk to you because you've been pretty weird lately, you're kind of off balance. And so they step back as well, and you make a bad decision. And it puts the organization into a downward spin where it's even harder for you to step away from the work and take a vacation. So it's a spin like this. The other pattern is somebody says to you, get out of the office and go for a walk with me. Mm-hmm. And then what happens is you begin to settle back down a little and sense yourself more. And besides, you sense them better. And when some crisis hits, they come to you and say, look, we can see this coming. What could we do to help? How are we going to do this? And it's a collective response, and the organization does even better. That Boyatzis and McKee research just has stayed with me. Whenever I feel myself getting spun up, I think.
So, because the piece that resonated with me of what Rick was saying is this sense of I'm part of this team, and that that loneliness being the emotion of isolation.
Yes.
Don't isolate me because I'm part of this team.
Yeah.
And so, yes, I have some extra responsibility, but as we're talking about what our expectations of each other are, I expect those of you too. And, you know, let's look after each other. Let's do all that kind of stuff. And just because I've got the captain's armband, if you like, then doesn't make me any less of a part of the team that requires the same care, consideration, support, etc.
That's really well said, David. I mean, I think if embedded in this conversation we're having is a real, sort of real full-scale assault on the taken for granted about leadership in a relationship to the people who work for us, support, etc. It's quite sacrilegious, if you will, in some ways. I mean, can you imagine a leader saying, I had gotten myself into just a miserable place. I made some miserable decisions. Things are totally screwed up around here. I'm going to the Lake District in England. You guys fix it. I'll be back in a month. Why wouldn't you say that?
And I think for me, it goes the other way, so that, you know, uh, the people who are part of that leader's team, as you're saying, that responsibility, because yeah, I love your speech, and it'd be wonderful if every leader did that speech at the beginning of their engagement and gave permission and encouragement and all of those things. Most of them don't. And so as the direct report, how do I still do that? Check in, push, do, and I think to that point about grief, don't just say, is there anything I can do, but to actually look for those opportunities when you recognize it to do something,
Right.
because I'm paying attention to where my boss is at. And
Well,
and you know, you see them go off, maybe they've got lots of grandkids that they've just had, and now they're busy with that, and then there's things happening, and they're trying to control the whole organization. How do you step up and say, look, that board meeting tomorrow night, I got it.
yes,
Let me run it.
right.
You know, by
Because
the way, developmentally, it'll be good for me too. It'll change the relationship, how the board sees me. It'll change my understanding of the issues at a board level, et cetera, et cetera. And yet it seems so radical in some way as we say it. And that if you think of, I was a part of a company now called Vistage. It used to be called TAP, the executive committee, and it started in Milwaukee with one guy who brought all of his all the execs he was coaching there, Bob Nurse, brought them together because he went, wait, this is crazy. So he brought all these executives together, and he called it the executive committee. And they came there for each other. Now, that was huge. And now we've got YPO, et cetera, et cetera. But Bob said at the time that this was a tech at the time, the executive committee, Vistage now, was an antidote to loneliness and bad decisions.
Right. People to talk to.
And so it's like we could only bring CEOs together. I mean, bringing those CEOs together is a step in a direction. But the nature of the relationship and the nature of the interaction and the nature of what they offered each other in that session could be done with a hierarchical situation. But we don't even think about it because the embedded assumptions that we have around leadership, followership, positions, hierarchy, authority, etc.
I was going to say that's people paying for, it's like coaching or Vistage or tech, it's people paying for a peer group. Whereas one of the things that I pulled out of what you shared is, if I'm on a team, even if I'm the leader of the team, I've got my group that should be helping take care of me. Now, there's some value to the coach go and talk through some things that I don't want to necessarily share with my team. It gets into that, but I really hear the clarion call of the team's responsibility is to look after each other, including the boss. Now, the other thing you raise is, though, the amplification of the boss makes it harder for the direct reports to reach out there. That sense of you're in a different role.
It takes.
David, I want to build on what you just said. Judy, do you want to go first?
Nope. Nope. You're on.
Because you triggered something in my musings about this. I wrote some stuff. This is what I would say to them, and about who looks after the boss. And then these things came out of my brain, and I'm going to offer them on that I put on paper about what we need to do for ourselves about self-care. Oh my God, everything you've heard about self-care, it's great stuff, but this is slightly different. Okay. So the first thing I wrote is, remember this: self-care is a studio that's open 24/7. Do walk in frequently. The leader isn't the person who dies on the hill for the cause. We all do. Second, practice this. No, 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 no. As soon as they can, this is different. As soon as they can understand, let your significant other, your kids, know what happens to you between the time you leave after breakfast and return for dinner, and be there for both. They have no idea what goes on for you. They have no idea about that life. They benefit from it, but we protect them from it in some way. And so they never feel like, or get inclined to say, is there anything I can do for you? Bring the human being home. And the last thing I wrote is, you and others, particularly your significant other and family, get good at managing the transitions that are going to happen over and over and over and over and over. This is self-care. Get good at managing the transitions that are going to happen over and over and over. The transitions that begin with your flight out and ends when your flight back lands. The longer it is between those two flights, the more important it is for you to be able, with your family, to manage the challenge of those transitions. And for those of us who have been on those planes, we know what we're talking about.
Right. I had really close friends, one of whom was here in the DC area and the other of whom was working internationally. And they found that every time he came back from wherever it was, they had just a huge squawking problem and so forth. So they finally decided that anytime that he traveled internationally, when he came home to a hotel. And the two of them would meet at the hotel and spend a day or so at the hotel and settle things down, and then they'd go home. And that's really intentionally managing a transition. And it's understanding all the unsettledness that comes from being, and even as I'm saying this, it strikes me that when we're talking about a CEO who's out and about a lot and comes back to the team, there's a settling in about the CEO coming back from heaven knows where that she or he has been for the last 10 days, raising funds or whatever they're doing. That this process of coming back together with the people who are our community or our support system, that really needs management.
I've talked about it as sometimes you have to dip the clutch to make the gears re-engage again. That because it was my practice, and sometimes coming home from a lot of work with you, Judy, in DC, that the gears would grind when I got home, because I'd been gone doing my thing, and Launda was home looking after the kids and dealing with all that. Both of us were working hard, and both of us were working hard on our own. And then when we came back into the spot we are together, the gears would grind for a while we refound that alignment.
I think we find it for people who've never driven a stick shift. Probably we have to find some other kind of analogy, but it's perfect because it just is the sense that, you're back home. This should be wonderful. You've been longing to be back home. And why is this so difficult?
Judy, we've experienced, as you talk, I think David and I, and I'm sure folks listening in, have had this experience. Is you've flown off. It was tense when you flew off. Are the kids okay? Did we do this? We got that covered. Who's going to do this? Etc. It's tense when you go off. The transition when you go off. God knows what happens. They don't know what happens to you in between flights. You come back. You can't wait to get home. You're dying to get home. You miss them, and it takes like 10 minutes or 15 minutes. And so is your significant other. It takes 10 or 15 minutes before you're at it for something you don't even know, why am I at it? And I love your addition about the same thing goes on with the team. And I've seen it firsthand. I've seen someone come from being the CEO, being away, working his butt off, promising come and have dinner and drinks with this group that's gathered together for this program. And he's exhausted, and they don't care for 1 minute or think 1 minute about the state he must be in and how he really wants to go home, and he's here, and they just start jumping all over him with all these issues and questions and whatever. It's the
Yeah, I thought
same
that was,
thing. Thank you for pointing that out.
yeah, that's a real nice touch to that work one, because it does happen, doesn't it? That
Oh,
there's the team, any member of the team's gone for a few days to something that's important somewhere else. They come back, then it feels like they've skipped through time and missed a few days. And I was in England in September. I missed our day of Humanergy meetings at our organization, and we've got October's on Monday. And I'm thinking, wow, it seems like a long time. And what did I miss? Because
Right.
there were some deep conversations that I wasn't part of. And so then that's the challenge of I don't want to have FOMO, that fear of missing out. And so I want that to be able to happen when I'm gone, but I need the smooth re-entry to be there so that or the time and the space for it as well.
I keep going back, Rick, to what you said, and that is loneliness is the felt experience of isolation. Don't do that to me. I mean, that's a remarkable thing to say to a team, that, this business about it's lonely at the top, that's the feeling that goes with being isolated. Don't do it to me.
I
And
think it's a great piece to leave today with, potentially, is to say everybody who's leading a team should be going in on Monday morning and saying that
right,
loneliness is the emotional version of isolation, and don't do that to me. Don't isolate me. Keep me engaged. Keep me in there. Involve me. Ask me. And I love Rick's push for take me out for a walk if you think I need it, and if I resist, push a little harder,
yes,
because there's probably some need. And I think this goes back to that self-care. Am I looking after me? And if I'm not, then are people around me noticing when I've got the rough edges and I need some extra looking after?
so who
Even if
looks
it's just a
after
matter
the,
of, hey, let's go grab a beer after we finish today,
yeah.
because you need that downtime or wherever it may be.
So we've said in some way, who looks after the leader? The team they're a part of, their family, themselves.
Mhm, mhm.
And I even think that expansion, as I was talking, that um, when I was gone to DC, I was busy. I was in the middle of something. I was doing all this great stuff. Launda was actually probably more isolated than I was, because she was home with 3 kids.
True.
And so that sense of adult isolation was there. And so then when I come back, it's like, well, you guys take care of me because I've been busy traveling. And the reality was I needed to take care of her because I'd been out with wonderful people like Judy, having lots of engagement and having people ask me how I'm doing. And she'd been at home with 3 kids that were causing the pain.
Great point. Great point.
Wonderful way to think back over these experiences
Yeah.
and think ahead.
Yeah. So, and so for anybody in a leadership position, let's make sure you're engaging the people around you and you're not allowing the isolation. And anybody that's part of that team, let's make sure that we're not isolating anybody just because of the position that they're in. Judy,
Yeah.
Rick, thanks again for joining us. A wonderful, deep, rich conversation. I look forward to hearing what people have to say about it.
Thank you, David.
Thanks, David.
That was the Humanergy Leadership Podcast. My name's David Wheatley. For further information about Humanergy, go to humanergy.com or check out our latest book, What Great Teams Do Great, from all good bookstores. Have a good one. Stay healthy.